The divide between the toys the elderly and young have played with has existed since one cave boy argued that his rock was sharper and larger than his cave dad's, which prompted the elder to shake his head sadly, cradle his own blunter rock to himself, and cherish the memories of all the skulls he'd caved in with it. Quantum leap a few million years to the 1920s, and the line becomes more blurred with the invention of women. More accurately, the caddish attempts of older men brandishing the same lustrous toys normally reserved for their younger counterparts in the mistaken belief that it compensates for the shortcomings of age. Ask your dad. He'll tell you. Meanwhile, in the 30th century, the technology of shiny baubles to dangle in front of younger, gullible, potential sex partners may have expanded into space, but sadly, so has middle-age spread and male pattern baldness. Gentlemen, the 300 series. I've got to hand it to the folks over at CIG. The exterior is as close to perfection as can be imagined. Clean, sculpted, graceful. It's more an example of what an artisan sculptor can coax from a block of the purest white marble, like Michelangelo's David, but with 3 penises. In the words of one big grizzled mechanic from another Roberts franchise,
I keep them around just to look at them.
While most of the ship's issues are to be found on the inside, the missile bay on the 325A suffers from one minor issue and one major. The former being a minor texture problem, the latter being it points down? The basics of combat dictate that in order to kill something, it has to be in front of you. From cavemen with rocks to pilots with lasers, all have had to have a target in front of them in order to see it and shoot it. Like stoners, weapons work best when they have to expend as little effort as possible to achieve their goal. After all, a stationary target is easier to hit than a moving one. So you point a weapon at a target, right? Makes sense, doesn't it? Not here. Here, a missile is shot downwards at around about 35 degrees before it starts its homing cycle about 2 seconds later. This gives a moving target an advantage, as this handy diagram will show. Even the official 300 series video shows a clean horizontal launch, more in the style of a modern F-35, but in truth, we're just shooting in the wrong direction. Moving inside the ship, because the rich and famous like climbing ladders for some reason, we're actually staring at the incomplete toilet. You see, people wash their hands after going to loo because, well, that sports control yoke is just a little bit nicer to use if it doesn't have traces of your bum fudge all over it. The space to the right of the lavatory can very easily accommodate a small basin, but instead we have a couple of small non-functional buttons, one with a picture of a human on it that I can only imagine calls a non-existent flight attendant, and the other with the implication that totally rad flames will incinerate your turds, which could cause the strangely metallic toilet roll to melt. Okay, there's a sink opposite the bed, but would a luxury brand like Origin want you stumbling up those little steps with your pants around your ankles as you hurry to cleanse yourself of an accidental miswipe?
Oh, great heavens!
So, if you're there long enough to eat and sleep and shit and piss, where's the rest of it? While in the 30th century we can magically pull pints of beer out of our arse, and space itself gives humanity the biggest dumping ground we could ever hope for, even bigger than Stevenage, we still need to consider what Plato said on the subject of stuff. When it's not in use, it needs to be stored. Under the sink is in serious need of a trip to IKEA. The left desperately yearns for a Lixholt, while the right could really go for a huge helping of Alex. No, not that Alex. Not only would it further add realism, because there's already a fridge there, but it would seriously help fill in some of the shipboard spaces that aren't of any practical gameplay use. And what's going on with this little crumb collector down the side here? Okay, I don't really imagine your average 325 owner would deign to clean their own ship. That's what Aurora owners are for. But in the 2950s, I'm pretty sure that we all would have evolved past silly design flourishes that are more trouble than they're worth. Moving on, we see one of the 300 series' biggest missed opportunities. Windows. I first considered this when I was thinking about doing space washing up with space fairy liquid and space plates. You see, here in Britain we always, and I mean always, place our kitchen sinks underneath the window, ostensibly so we can stare at and silently judge our neighbours. And finally, the door. Even the Spartan as Balls 100 series has a nice slider here to cover up the inner machinations of that which keeps the freezing tendrils of a space kraken at bay. And why not an air shield? You don't want those expensive bed sheets getting sucked out the door every time you go for a spacewalk. To sum up, the 325A is the ultimate expression of everything I wanted when I was 18, a swinging bachelor pad with missiles and lasers enrobed in an expression of luxury normally reserved for the kind of contrived wanker that uses terms like enrobed in an expression of luxury. But also like an 18-year-old, not quite fully yet realised.